everyone, welcome to another edition of the Sussex Writes Youth Cafe Lockdown Series. We've been talking about misinformation and disinformation for a while now. Today, we're going to be having another guest, Ayo Sokale, who was born in Kent, lived in Nigeria, and raised in Eastbourne, a place that we are so familiar with the Sussex Writes as we work with the Eastbourne Academy and Gildred House Schools. Ayo is a civil engineer by profession, but in May 2019, she campaigned and won a local government election as a Labour and cooperative candidate for Caversham in Reading. She's now a councillor and she seeks to transform the local community, drawing on her experience as a civil engineer, a fundraiser and volunteer. Ayo represents her constituents on the Planning Application Committee and the Adult Social Care, Children's Services and Education Committee. Ayo also sits on the parenting panel, holds surgeries to listen to local residents, and leads community campaigns. The most recent and one of our most important being the Black Lives Matter campaign. As a young woman in politics, Councillor Sokale is uniquely placed to talk to us today about the issue of disinformation and misinformation during the COVID-19 crisis. Ayo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jennifer, for such a fantastic and generous introduction. You make me sound very good.
Right,
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
All right. We're going to go right into the questions we have for you today. But first of all, can you tell us what your role is exactly in the local politics and how you got there? I mean, you look quite young, and so I'm sure you have quite an inspiring story to tell. So how did you get there, and why does what you do, why is it important?
So, thank you, Jennifer. That is a fantastic question. So my story is I've always been involved in my community, primarily doing charity work and volunteering. And when I chose my career profession, I was seeking a way to add value to society. And at the age of 9, I realized that was civil engineering. But as I got older, I wanted to find new ways of adding value and really giving my highest contribution. And that's how I got here into local politics, so to speak. That is my journey. But on a practical level, I've been part of the Labour Party, who I represent as a local councillor, as a teenager since university. I dipped in and out of that as I studied and did my master's degree. And when I graduated and moved to Reading, where I live now, 4 years ago, I just wanted to do more. So I worked in the party, was on the executive committee here, and then when the opportunity came along, I campaigned for local issues, and I was fortunate and I was elected on the 2nd of May last year. And that year has been incredible, and I worked really hard for my community because I really do believe that local councillors have such an opportunity to transform their society. You mentioned in my introduction the committees I sit on. And as councillors, that's what we do. We represent on these committees, and we get to shift policy, we get to lobby, we get to scrutinise, and we get to work to make sure that the issues that matter to people in our wards and also the wider borough is really represented in the policy and the decisions we make. And these decisions could be anything from planning, which is what's going to get built next, which may seem on a surface level uninteresting, but actually when you dig down into that, it determines contributions to local schools, to infrastructure, to sustainable and active travel. And all of these things actually improve all our lives when they're done correctly. More active travel reduces NO2, it reduces pollutants in the environment, and helps us have a better air quality, which is good for all of us. And these issues tend to actually have the most effect on the lower socioeconomic groups in our society. So actually to sit on these committees and to really care about those people means that I get to practically influence and improve their situations. And that's just one committee.
I mean, in Nigeria, we don't have young people as young as 20-something being in serious positions like that. So I wonder, is it the same here? How did you go, was there the fact that, oh, she's too young, we can't take her seriously? Or do you have your co-competitors as young as you are? Like, what was it like?
There are not many of us. In fact, I think being 35 as a councillor or 40 is very young. Normally, that's always like, oh, you're a young councillor. But I think in our council, we are trying to pick competent people And often those are people who are working professionally in certain fields and they have a particular perspective. So that is what I went through the process saying, you know, you don't have an engineer here, you don't have anyone with a STEM background. How are you providing better environmental thinking? Because that's what I do as a day job. Even our youngest ever councillor, I mean, she's studying to be a lawyer. So we have high level of competencies because I guess people ask more of us because why do you think at 20 or 21 or 22 or 23, 24, 25, 26, all the way up to like 40, which you still be deemed young, got to fight your corner and show what you have to offer that they don't have. And believe me, we have something to offer. And we have to be in the rooms because half the change affects us and our generation.
Well, I think it's really great to have young voices being this visible and actually involved in things that bring about some kind of important change. And I'm going to then hand over to Esperance, who's going to ask the next question.
That was a well-articulated answer. And now if I'd go to my next question, from your perspective as a local politician, what has been your biggest challenge when dealing with a community that would be definitely misinformed about COVID-19? And also, do you have any sense of a source of misinformation that you could share?
So thank you for that, Esperanza. That is a good question, and I have some ideas about that. I think I have two things I want to say on that matter. As a local councillor, I see it as important that I'm not adding further chaos into the narrative. So an element of that is having self-control, right? Coming with the title of councillor means that actually people may listen to what I say and give it more weight, which means that I have to make sure the work that I do and the information that I put out in the public realm is robust and well researched and, you know, appropriately sourced. So I'm not putting in fake news, so to speak. So that's one element of it. It's almost taking that personal responsibility to ensure that I am not being part of the problem. And I think that's really critical that we all do that. And then the second item of that is it is important that we do take the time to research and slow down our responses. So I think one of the sources of misinformation in the COVID-19 pandemic has been the speed in which we often respond. I think now we draw to the, I wouldn't say the end of it, but the slowing down of our reaction to this, and I guess getting used to this new normal, you can see that people are slowing down in the way they think and slowing down in the way they process information. I think in the past we have a very rapid cycle of we need new news, we need new information, we need new data. But data is useless unless it becomes information, and it's critical that that goes through that QA process. And that QA process, quality assurance, I know I sound like an engineer here, is really important. And I think we all need to do it, but also it's important that those who are feeding information are also undertaking that role for us. Instead of having huge volumes of information that I put out there, I try and make sure that what I put out there is concise, useful, and signposts to government sites and really reputable sources. So there is no chance that I'm actually feeding into the frenzy of just data, useless data, that no one can understand or articulate to make good reasons, to have good reasonings and also make good decisions. I think on an anecdotal level, you do have people who love a good conspiracy. And I think scenarios like this, they do feed those who love to gorge themselves on the conspiracy theory narratives. And I think it's something that we all need to be aware that we might have a desire to get involved in that because it's maybe appetizing, it's interesting, it's fast paced, but we all have to do better than that. You know, we all have to do better than that. I think that is a good statement. We all have to do better than that. And I don't blame any one person. I think collectively, we all have to do better than that. So my advice is slowing it down. I think we haven't been slow enough till now. So if we do take a lesson out of the pandemic, it's to slow things down and to increase the bandwidth we have for the quality assurance process, and also to do some internal reflection on why we're putting information out there. So I actually use a test that my aunt said, she said this to me when I was a child. She said, when you're going to say something, is it beneficial? Is it uplifting, and is it worthy? I know I paraphrase her quite heavily here, but that's basically the questions I ask myself when I put data out there. And I hope others will start to ask themselves those same questions as well.
Thank you so much for the elaborate answer. And I'd like to call Anthony to take over.
Hello. Apologies. I am at a center where my internet bandwidth cannot go beyond 2G, so I have to put off my video. So Ayo, an absolute pleasure to have you here. My question is, what are the alternative ways of reaching people in the community who do not have access to technology or the internet, and how might we ensure reliability of these alternative sources?
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much. That's a great question. Like non-technological ways of communicating, social media and the internet can do so much for us, and we do take that for granted. But there's so many other ways of communicating that we kind of have forgotten about. And I feel as a local politician and activist, they're the bread and butter of what we do. So one of those things is door knocking and going out into the community in almost a physical presence. It's something that we as councillors do all the time, pre-pandemic, and we're looking to do now, post-pandemic, in a very different way, which is open air surgeries. So where we meet people in the community in large spaces and we socially distance, but we communicate with them physically. I'm a very physical person. I think that a lot can be got out of interactions in person, where people can almost share more, and the spoken word often can share more than a tweet can share or a Facebook post. There's so much more empathy. I mean, communication is only 30%, I believe, the words you say. So the body language we get from meeting people in person is so valuable. But obviously, it's not just meeting people face to face in the park or knocking on their doors when that's allowed again. I think it's very much leafleting and putting really good written information into people's houses, their flats. And writing things are clear and meet their need. So as a councillor, it's letting people know we have a change going on in the community, be aware of it before it changes so you can best prepare. And that is just writing a letter and dropping in their post box. Or for me, on a personal level, when the pandemic started, I wrote handwritten notes, which I then had to photocopy, because I think I did 50 of those handwritten notes, and I was like, oh God, I can't keep writing so many of these, and I had to get them photocopied. Thankfully, my local shop were fantastic, and they did this for me free of charge. I copied these notes and I put them in every single letterbox in my neighbourhood, and we started a community chat group where we could help people who needed lots of support or couldn't go out or were completely shielding. And that didn't rely on the internet so much to put a group together, but in fact the initial premise of it was, you know, handwritten notes and, you know, physically putting them in people's houses. So there is that. In summary, there are multiple ways, I think, without technology you can communicate with people. I think face-to-face surgeries or meeting in the parks are fantastic ways of doing this. Secondly, letter dropping into people's homes is also a really useful, I think, useful, underrated method of doing this. And thirdly, something that I haven't actually mentioned, but putting posters and leaflets in public places that people in the community often go to, so post offices, community shops, or places of worship, places that people often have a high footfall. And though people aren't maybe using places of worship at the moment, they are going outside them for the notice boards that they tend to house, and that is a useful place to put information that is critical. So that's me in a nutshell. I think those are 3 things that you can do without technology that can actually give reliable alternative sources of information in terms of dispersing the information. But the source of the information itself has to be good, and I guess that comes down to us, or, you know, fellow councillors or the council as a whole, to make sure that the messages we put out there are completely factual and correct, which we do. So thank you, Anthony. That was a great question.
Thank you as well, Ayo. Those were really insightful remarks. I'd like to call upon Emily so that she can ask the next question.
Thank you. My question for you has 2 parts. So this week we've been discussing a lot the ways in which social media can often correct biased news sources, but also how social media can be a major source of misinformation and disinformation in and of itself. So how do you see the relationship between mainstream media and social media, particularly in how they affect politics and good governance? And then secondly, do you have any tips on how best to navigate the realms of social media and mainstream media?
Emily, I've given that some thought. I had some recent experience with the world of social media, and I'll draw on that as a source for my answer. So in a recent incident that occurred, and I'm going to be very vague here, there was misinformation in the pop press about what had happened. Using social media, I could clarify the situation to make that well known, so that the popular press who pick up their stories via social media and etc. can pick that up. Or I can amplify the voices of people who know the right answers and have the correct facts. However, due to the nature we have on social media, maybe the way we dehumanize one another because we are so far apart when we are virtually interacting, it can lead to let's say some less than pleasant interaction. So my lesson here is, it is critical that when the wider media has the wrong story and the wrong narrative, that we do use our voices, and we also amplify the voices of those who know more and are best placed to actually speak on those topics. But you do have to take social media with some element of distance. So the impacts of the negative comments and horrible messaging you may receive do not become something that weigh you down as a person. So this is me drawing down from an experience, but also trying to make it more of a positive lesson, because in the example I'm speaking about, there was a poor narrative in the press, and we were able to actually change that, and the next day the press was saying the correct, truthful thing. And I think that's fantastic. So we can see that social media, when used well, can actually be a really good way of providing overview and scrutiny, but also actually more than scrutiny, implementing change and pushing forward the correct narrative. The only side effect of that is we do have a growing toxic culture of pylons on Twitter and social media, which I think is very negative and also not useful to having diverse conversations and having, you know, open communication. Because I think when you do have an attacking approach, then you build defensiveness, and defensiveness will never breed any real solution for anyone. So that's answering that element of how can you use both social media and the, I guess, the news media, and they can work together. More than that, I think, in how do we relate with media in general, I'd answer that second part of the question like this. I've been speaking to my peers, people my age, I'm 27, and I'm hearing more and more people who are getting their news from alternative sources. So YouTube, Rogan Report, Reuben Report, all these other people who are providing alternative views on what the current media is showing. The benefit of this is, one, it's more of a long process. It's what we call a long form interviews, where you have maybe an hour to discuss and break down like issues of our time with one expert at a time. I guess like what we're doing now. And I think that has so much value, this kind of communication and that kind of communication, because you have time to break things down. I think a lot of things are only well understood when you go into them and you dig into them and you question me back and forth. That's how we really get into the detail of the problems and solve them. So I think that works really well, because it allows people to go on that journey of thinking, which I think when we digest media like the news on our phone and it's just a headline, you may not get that depth, which I think is very valuable on those forms. So I think that's a growing trend, and I think it's one that I actually thoroughly support. The only caveat to that, I think, is to basically make sure that you're hearing the news and views from all walks of life and all lengths of the political spectrum. I know you've probably heard so much about this in the past when it comes to misinformation, but we are often in echo chambers. I am only hearing people who have the same political views as me, so to speak, most of the time. So I have to work very hard to seek out alternative points of view, to make sure that I can weigh those points up together and then decide what is the right information and what is correct. So I think that's my advice long term, is that we all try and find ranges of sources for media. So maybe picking up a paper that isn't actually biased to your political point of view and getting into the head and thought process of someone who thinks very differently from you. I think there's value in that. And I think it's not just misinformation, but it's having a broader mindset. And a broader mindset will mean that when you're faced with facts that challenge your own world perspective, you can actually absorb them and understand the truth.
Thank you, Ayo, for that really inspiring answer. I'll now hand over to Salome to take over.
Great, thank you very much. It's really great to hear from you, Ayo, as a campaigner for youth and especially women in governance. It's really exciting to hear you speak and talk about your experience. So let's go straight into the question. We debated the problem of regulation. The issue of government censorship comes up against the harm caused by uncontrolled information and disinformation. From your perspective, how might regulation work, especially when governments may be inclined to control narratives in ways harmful to the democratic process?
I personally truly believe in freedom of the press and freedom of speech. So I don't want to live in a world where government controls the narrative. Now, if you are a conspiracy theorist, so to speak, as I mentioned earlier, you might have other opinions about if that's currently the status right now. We'll leave that as a complete different topic to be had on a different day. But I think when it comes to the idea of censorship, I am not for censorship. I think that it's problematic in its entirety. Actually, I wanted to find something positive to say about censorship, but I can't. I think maybe the only thing I can draw from that is maybe it protects people's feelings. But to be fair, drawing on my recent experience on social media and in the news, I think I would still rather have my feelings hurt and have negative messages than have a social media that's completely censored into what people can say. Because I do think that there is fear that I will never know what people think, and I will never know the thoughts of people that surround me. I mean, a lot of people have gone through this pandemic, and with Black Lives Matter and a lot of the issues that are going on the worldwide scale, they're using their phones and social media to see how other people are perceiving this, and you might view people who have completely different points of view, and they might be worrying points of view. But you know what? I'd rather know what your points of view are. I'd rather go in a room and be well equipped with the information to make change than rather be blindsided by not knowing. So I've gone around the houses there. I do think that censorship is not something that would ever benefit us as a society, because democracy is important. And as someone who sits in a party where we currently sit in opposition to the current government, imagine if we did have censorship and the Labour Party couldn't challenge and provide scrutiny and really go in on the government and say, do better on this, do better on that, and our voices were completely silenced. How would we advocate for change? And we can talk about the present and where we are now in the UK, but also we have these amazing and devastating and distressing examples of when this has happened in other societies and where this ends up. So in terms of that, I cannot see the value of it. I think that we need a society where we're emotionally mature enough to have free speech, but not have the desire to be hateful, and to take on the personal responsibility that we have a role to play in providing clear information, in creating a better world through the information that we're absorbing, and making a change that way. And I think it's the only caveat I would put on all of that is I think journalists and those who work in the media do have a responsibility to all of us as citizens, as they do themselves as human beings, to make sure that the information they put out there is verified, it's validated, it is suitable and well resourced, and there is evidence for what they're saying, because so many of us don't do our own due diligence and we take everything at face value, and to create culture wars, to create unrest and unseat civilizations by your untruths, that is an abomination in my point of view, and you should take that as something to really think on and to do better at. And I think that is a common theme in most things I will say in terms of misinformation. It comes down to individual responsibility. Even those who work in the industries may not be regulated as such in a way that we would like to see them, but it's important that they do take on the responsibility to do better as an individual and then collectively change happens.
Thank you so much for the valuable input. I'll hand over the mic to Jennifer.
Okay, Ayo, moving away from misinformation and disinformation, I think in one of your responses earlier, you referred to us having to adapt to this new normal. And that brings us to the last question. What are your hopes for a post-COVID-19 world in terms of economically, politically, or whichever way you see it? What would you imagine life to be like after COVID-19?
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much on that one. How do I see the world post-COVID and the new normal? I want to see a more sustainable world. That is a massive driver for me. And I see sustainability as the three pillars of sustainability, the way I guess engineers view it, and those who work in the fields of, in those practical fields, we view it in terms of economical sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. And I think that if we can create a new normal that takes on the best lessons from COVID-19 and the pandemic and the way the communities have come together, the best lessons from the fact that we are slowing down, we are working from home, and we can do this, and some industries can do this, and we can reduce the pressure on our roads as opposed to scaling up larger roads that take more traffic. Instead, just reducing that burden and shifting the working world into one that is a little bit better as a result of this pandemic. I think we can learn lessons in difficult times, and we as a society are going through and have been through a difficult time. But if we can go through it and distill clear actions, which is 1, we're going to improve active travel. 2, we're going to look at a new way of working. Maybe some of the ideas that some of the utopists of all of time is saying, you know, the reduced working week, flexible hours. All of these things actually have not just economic benefits, but they have social benefits. More people have jobs. Families are more unified because they have more time to spend together. People are well socialized, so they have more of the ethos and values. We can reduce crime that way. And some of the other issues that have seemed almost unachievable prior to the lockdown became achievable because government prioritized it. And I think that is a lesson that we must always learn. We can only achieve the things in which we prioritize. So as we go into this new normal, I think there needs to be a sense of some collective and individual reflection as us as individuals, as us as local government, as us in central government, to say what will be our priorities and what will be the lessons we learn and what will we do to make our society better from this experience. And I think there's just so much we can do. I could list ideas in terms of the economy and how we could address that, or maybe improving homelessness long term, because we did it short term, so we can do this long term, or improving the environment, or social cohesion, or community groups coming together, or us as individuals taking the time to stop and slow and say hi and be kind. I think on so many levels, there's so much change that can happen. And that is a society I want to see going on. One that has learned its lessons and has implemented them and has looked internally to figure out what it wants to be and has then implemented that change.
I think from everything you've really said, what I've been able to gather is there's this idea that there is the government and then there is us, and we almost want to think we have no power to change anything. But from what you've said, it's like the responsibility is not just theirs alone. Every individual has a personal responsibility to do something. So it's like it's personal and then it's collective. And so there's this popular line I like to tell my students: be the change you seek. So if you want something to be different, then you have to do something differently. And I think that's something you've also hinted on from this talk.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Would love to go on, but I'm sure you have something else to go on to. So thanks so much for coming on this session. We've learned so much, and we hope we can catch up sometime again. And you have a good day.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. It was a pleasure to be here. And just a last point, I do want to encourage people to look at how they can have change in their local community. The role of councillor isn't for the elite or odd people or strange people or people with 10 heads or geniuses. They're people like you and me, normal people, and we can make that change. So do look into those roles. I want to see more young people in those rooms and more diverse minds in those rooms. So please do try and find out the pathways in which you can elicit your personal change. That's my call to action. Thank you for having me.